Revenge films. I never got along with my 30-year-old unemployed brother. When I left home and got a job, he threw away everything in my room. His excuse was that he didn't have enough room to put his toys and wanted more room for that. I found out by accident one day when I visited home and went into my room. At first, all I saw was an empty room with a bunch of things that looked unfamiliar, and I was in shock. No one, including my parents, told me about this. And all my important memories were lost forever. What the hell? Why is all of my stuff gone? I asked my brother. But this asshole just laughed and said,
"Well, you weren't using that room anymore, so I made good use of it."
I brought this up to my parents and they said, "You left the house, so you don't need that room anymore," and seemed caught in between. You see, my brother was working back then and was going to take on the family business, so although they felt a little bad for me, my parents were on his side. My brother knew this and just stood behind them with a victorious smile on his face. No matter how angry I was, all my stuff was gone, and there was no getting it back. My brother said to me,
"I got rid of all your trash. You should be thankful."
I was pissed and vowed to get him back one day. After I had left the house, my parents had asked me to send them money, and I had a little extra cash. So I was sending them some each month, but I cut them off. My brother, on the other hand, not only didn't give them any money, but was given an allowance. I always thought it was stupid that I was sending money, and my brother was getting an allowance. But I was paying my parents as an act of kindness. But if they were going to be on his side, I was done with them, and I stopped visiting home. I regretted all those gifts that I used to bring back to my parents. I used to take my parents out for dinner, too. And my brother would come along and I would pay for him as well. I would always take them out somewhere nice, because I couldn't visit that often. But even then, my brother would say,
"Well, let's go to this other place that I wanted to go to."
I always thought to myself that it wasn't him that I was taking out. But my parents used to convince me to take him with us. I never realized that they were just taking advantage of me, until a coworker pointed it out to me. As soon as I cut them off, I had much more money to spend on myself. I spent that extra cash on clothes, hobbies, and interior for my house, which fulfilled my life and made me more motivated. But within a few months, I started receiving more calls from home. "How are you? How's work?" they would ask. They never called like this before. They would start off with small talk and eventually imply sending them money and coming home to save rent and things like that. Oh, come on, you guys threw away my stuff. Where would I live? I thought to myself. My parents wanted me to feel bad for them. Business isn't so good lately, and there have been a lot of unforeseen expenses. You live alone, so you have a little left over, don't you? We sometimes can't even gather enough money for food these days, they would say. Oh, really? Well, you have Frank, I'd say, and avoid the conversation. One time, they told me that the family business was really about to fall and they needed money. They wanted a big amount, and it almost made me laugh. "Oh, sorry. I've had some unforeseen expenses, you know," I told them. Well, that was a lie. I had plenty of money to live. My parents finally started getting angry at me. "Aren't you just overspending and living an expensive lifestyle? It's my money, so it's not your problem. I'm living on my own now. Don't you think it's your duty to help your parents out? What do you mean? You have Frank." You used to give him an allowance and he never gave you guys a dime, right? Don't you think you should ask him first? I think it's his turn to do his part, don't you? My parents just mumbled after that. They cut the call short to avoid any more questions from me. But I already knew that Frank had been fired. My brother used to always say,
I can quit any time I want. I have the family business.
I was sure he was saying the same at work. Knowing Frank, he was probably a jerk at work with a mindset like that. I heard he also stole things from work and called in sick to go on trips and things like that. I know so much without talking to him because I had a fake account on SNS that I used to exchange messages with him. I made the account when I swore revenge after he threw away all my belongings. He sent me the pictures of his trips that he went on when he called in sick and selfies of him stealing the company's equipment, so I had plenty of proof. I took screenshots and sent them to his company through an anonymous account. Lying about being sick is bad, but stealing equipment is a crime, you know? He was subjected to disciplinary action and quit shortly after. I received a message from the company telling me the whole story and thanking me for bringing it to their attention. I mean, what kind of a useless fool calls in sick to go on trips and steals company equipment? After he quit, he took on the family business, but he did nothing but act like an arrogant fool, and the family business continues to decline. Our family business had a fair amount of workers, but knowing my brother, he probably went around arrogantly saying things like,
I'm your boss now, so do as I say.
It was all too easy to imagine. He foolishly tried taking the company public and go online and things like that, even though he had no experience running a company. Everything he tried failed, and the business just went down. My parents went back, afraid that the company was really going to go out of business, but they were having a hard time building back what had been tipped over, and so they came to me. And my brother ended up being chased out of the company and is currently unemployed and doesn't even leave the house. Until then, my parents had planned to inherit the company to my brother, but since he was so disliked by the workers and many workers were about to quit because of him, so they told him,
You don't have to come back anymore.
My brother still believed that he was a genius and questioned his release until my parents told him,
You don't know how to run a company. You're going to put us out of business.
And his sense of self-worth was destroyed. Now he barely comes out of his room, and since business is bad, my parents can't afford to give him an allowance. My parents tell me that they're threatening to kick him out if he doesn't find a job and pay rent, but it's none of my business anymore. What goes around comes around, you know? I can tell just by watching Frank that he doesn't have what it takes to inherit the family business. But I think it's also my parents' fault for not being able to anticipate that. And after all these years of having his back, it was foolish of them to think that I would be willing to help them with money. Honestly, it's none of my business if the family business fails. It'll be tough to look after my useless brother, too, but I don't plan on helping out at all. How was today's video? If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Stay tuned for more.